They thought they were inviting her to find love, but by the end of the night, she would discover she had been invited to become a joke. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe dignity matters more than popularity, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Amara Bennett. The message from her twin sister had arrived just after lunch. Short, cheerful, unusually kind. Amara stared at the screen of her aging phone while sitting in the employee break room of the community center where she worked. I found someone perfect for you. Blind date tonight. 7 o'clock. Trust me. Trust me. Those two words felt strange coming from Brielle Bennett. For as long as Amara could remember, trust between them had been fragile. They shared the same birthday, the same smile, and the same deep brown eyes. Yet life had always treated them differently. Brielle seemed to walk through every room as if a spotlight followed her. Amara was the person who quietly cleaned up after everyone left. Still, the message stirred something hopeful inside her. Maybe people changed. Maybe sisters grew up. Maybe this was Brielle's way of reaching across years of competition and misunderstandings. By 6:30 that evening, Amara stood outside one of Manhattan's trendiest restaurants. Golden light spilled from massive windows onto the sidewalk. Luxury cars lined the curb. Men in tailored suits and women in elegant dresses drifted through the entrance beneath sparkling chandeliers. Amara smoothed the sleeves of her navy blue dress and checked her reflection in the glass. The dress was simple. She had bought it on clearance nearly a year ago and saved it for special occasions. Tonight felt special, or at least she wanted it to. Her stomach fluttered with nervous excitement as she stepped inside. The restaurant looked like something from a movie. Marble floors reflected warm amber lighting. Crystal fixtures glowed overhead. Soft piano music floated through the air. Everything felt expensive, polished, and slightly intimidating. A hostess greeted her with a bright smile. "Miss Bennett, your party is already here." Amara blinked. "Already? Right this way." The hostess led her toward a private section near the center of the restaurant. As they walked, Amara noticed something odd. Several people seemed to be watching her. A few whispered to each other. One woman raised her phone for a second before lowering it again. Amara told herself she was imagining things. Then she saw Brielle. Her sister sat at a long table surrounded by nearly a dozen people. Some were influencers Amara recognized from social media. Others looked like friends she had never met. Everyone appeared dressed for a celebration. Brielle spotted her immediately and flashed a dazzling smile. There she is. The entire table turned toward Amara at once. The hostess stepped aside. Amara froze. Something felt wrong. Not obviously wrong. Just wrong enough to make her pulse quicken. She scanned the table looking for the mystery date Brielle had promised. Instead, she found dozens of eyes fixed on her with an anticipation she couldn't understand. Brielle stood and lifted a champagne glass. Her smile widened. Around the table, several guests exchanged knowing looks. Somewhere near the back, a phone camera quietly started recording. And at that exact moment, Amara realized she was the only person in the room who didn't know why she had really been invited. The smile on Brielle Bennett's face was the first thing that made Amara's chest tighten. It was not a sister's smile. It was the smile of someone waiting for a performance to begin. Brielle lifted her glass slightly higher and looked around the table. Everyone, she actually came. Laughter rippled across the group. Not loud enough to draw attention from the entire restaurant, but sharp enough to cut. Amara remained standing beside her chair, forcing herself to smile even though confusion was beginning to replace her excitement. "What is going on?" she asked quietly. Brielle pressed a hand against her chest dramatically. "Come on, Amara. Relax. We are just having fun." Several guests chuckled. One man, near the end of the table, raised his phone and angled it toward her. Another woman whispered something to her friend before both dissolved into laughter. Amara looked around for the blind date she had been promised. "Where is he?" she asked. Brielle's grin widened. "Oh, you mean the mystery man?" More laughter. "He is running a little late." Something about the way she said it made the table laugh even harder. Amara felt heat rise into her face. "Brielle." "What?" Her sister replied innocently. "You should see your face right now." The people around the table exchanged amused looks. Amara suddenly noticed that several phones were recording openly now. The realization sent a chill through her stomach. This was not a gathering. It was an audience. Brielle leaned back in her chair. "Everybody has been dying to meet my sister." Amara hated the emphasis she placed on the word sister. It sounded less like family and more like a setup. Tell them about yourself, Brielle continued. Tell them how many dates you have been on this year. A few people snickered. Amara's fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. I do not think that is anyone's business. Exactly, Brielle said, laughing. Because the number is 0. The table erupted. Amara heard someone clap. Another person nearly spilled a drink from laughing. The humiliation arrived slowly at first, like cold water creeping across a floor. Then it hit all at once. This was the blind date. The joke was her. Brielle stood and walked around the table like a host addressing an audience. You all know how my sister is. She works all the time. Never takes risks. Never has fun. I thought maybe tonight we could help her finally find someone. More laughter followed. Amara looked toward the exit. It suddenly seemed very far away. You invited all these people for this? She asked. For a brief second, something flashed in Brielle's eyes. Satisfaction. Do not be dramatic, she said. Everybody is having fun. Then she gestured toward one of the empty chairs. Sit down. The night is just getting started. Around them, cameras continued recording. Smiles widened. Conversations quieted. And as Amara slowly realized how carefully every detail had been planned, a painful truth settled into her heart. This was never about helping her find love. Someone had spent weeks creating the perfect stage. They simply needed her to walk into the spotlight. The cruelest wounds are often delivered by the people who know exactly where your heart is weakest. Amara remained standing while the laughter slowly faded into scattered conversations. Nobody seemed embarrassed. Nobody looked away. In fact, most appeared entertained, as if they had purchased tickets to a show. Brielle returned to her seat and casually checked the comments streaming across one of the phones in front of her. Amara noticed the screen filling with laughing emojis and messages from strangers. Her sister was not simply humiliating her in a restaurant. She was broadcasting it. For a moment, Amara considered turning around and leaving. It would have been easy. A few steps across the marble floor. A quick ride down the elevator. Then a taxi home. But something held her in place. Perhaps it was pride. Perhaps it was exhaustion. She was tired of running from discomfort. Tired of pretending things did not hurt. Tired of acting as though Brielle's behavior was harmless. The truth was that tonight felt painfully familiar. Not because of the restaurant. Not because of the cameras. But because she had spent most of her life standing in the shadow of her twin sister. Growing up in Brooklyn, they had shared a tiny apartment above a laundromat. Their mother worked double shifts at a nursing home, while their father drove delivery trucks 6 days a week. Money was always tight. Opportunities were rare. Yet somehow, whenever a choice had to be made, Amara found herself stepping aside for Brielle. When there was enough money for one dance program, Brielle enrolled. When only one teenager could attend a summer leadership camp, Amara stayed home so Brielle could go. When Brielle forgot assignments, Amara helped finish them. When Brielle got into trouble, Amara defended her. She never kept score. She never demanded recognition. Family was supposed to help family. At least that was what she believed. Over the years, however, a pattern emerged. The more Amara gave, the more Brielle expected. Praise flowed toward one sister, while responsibility settled on the other. Brielle became skilled at attracting attention. Amara became skilled at carrying burdens quietly. Even now, sitting at that crowded table surrounded by expensive handbags, designer watches, and glowing phone screens, Brielle looked exactly as she always had whenever she occupied the center of attention. Confident, admired, untouchable. Amara looked around the room again. The golden light reflected against crystal glasses. Waiters moved between tables carrying elegant plates. Somewhere in the distance, a pianist continued playing soft melodies as though nothing unusual was happening. Yet inside Amara, something was changing. The humiliation still hurt. The betrayal still stung. But beneath the pain, another feeling was beginning to surface. Clarity. For years she had convinced herself that Brielle would eventually mature. That one day her sister would appreciate every sacrifice. Tonight destroyed that illusion. Brielle was not trying to impress strangers at Amara's expense because she was immature. She was doing it because she enjoyed being the star of the story. And Amara had unknowingly spent years helping write that story. Across the table, Brielle glanced up from her phone and smiled again. It was the same smile she had worn their entire lives whenever she believed she had won. What neither sister realized was that somewhere inside the restaurant, beyond the circle of cameras and laughter, another pair of eyes had already begun paying attention. Some people reveal who they truly are only after they believe everyone is watching. Brielle rose from her chair again, energized by the attention flowing toward her from both the table and the growing audience online. The comments on her live stream continued climbing. Every few seconds, another notification flashed across her screen. She smiled at each one as though approval from strangers were more valuable than loyalty to family. Amara watched quietly. The hurt remained, but she refused to give Brielle what she wanted most. A reaction. Tears would become content. Anger would become content. Walking away too soon would become content. Somehow, every choice seemed designed to benefit her sister. Then Brielle clapped her hands together. Okay, everyone. Since tonight is all about helping Amara step out of her comfort zone, I prepared something special. Excited murmurs spread around the table. Several guests immediately raised their phones higher. Amara felt her stomach tighten. Across the restaurant, conversations continued beneath the glow of chandeliers and golden light. Glasses clinked softly. Elegant music floated through the room. Yet around Brielle's table, a different atmosphere had formed. One built on anticipation and embarrassment. Brielle, Amara said quietly. Enough. Her sister pretended not to hear. Instead, she nodded toward a technician standing near one wall of the private dining area. The man tapped a screen. A second later, a massive display mounted above the room flickered to life. Amara stared upward. Her heart sank. The first image appeared. It was a photograph from high school. Amara wearing oversized glasses. Brielle standing beside her. The caption read, "The pretty twin and the responsible twin." Laughter followed. Then another slide appeared. Then another. Old family photos. Awkward pictures. Embarrassing moments collected across years and transformed into entertainment. Every image was carefully chosen to make one sister shine while making the other appear invisible. Some guests laughed openly. Others looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Amara stood perfectly still. The slideshow continued. Childhood birthday parties. Graduation pictures. Family reunions. The message beneath every image was the same. Brielle was the star. Amara was the supporting character. What hurt most was not the photographs themselves. It was the realization that Brielle had spent time creating this. Hours, maybe days, planning every detail, preparing every joke, turning private memories into public humiliation. Amara lowered her eyes. Her mother would have been heartbroken to see this. The thought settled heavily in her chest. For years their parents had encouraged them to support one another, to celebrate one another. Instead, Brielle had transformed family history into a performance. Around the table, people waited for Amara to break. They expected tears, an argument, some dramatic reaction worthy of another viral clip. Instead, Amara reached for her purse. The room grew quieter. Brielle noticed immediately. "Where are you going?" she asked. Amara finally looked directly at her sister. Not with anger, not with hatred, simply with disappointment. The expression seemed to unsettle Brielle far more than outrage would have. "Home," Amara replied softly. Then she turned toward the exit. The marble floor reflected the warm light above her as she walked away from the table. Behind her, whispers spread through the room. Phones continued recording. Yet as Amara approached the restaurant's grand entrance, something unexpected happened. From a secluded corner reserved for private guests, a man in a tailored black suit slowly rose from his chair. Until that moment, nobody had noticed how closely he had been watching. Power rarely announces itself. It simply stands up, and the room notices. Amara had almost reached the entrance when she sensed a shift behind her. The laughter that had followed her across the restaurant suddenly weakened. Conversation slowed. Even the people holding phones seemed distracted by something else. She paused and glanced over her shoulder. A man was crossing the room. He moved without hurry, yet every step seemed to command attention. His black suit was perfectly tailored. The warm light from the chandeliers reflected against the silver watch at his wrist. He was tall, composed, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being listened to. Amara did not recognize him. Most of the restaurant did. At the private table he had just left, several executives had immediately risen to their feet. A restaurant manager standing nearby straightened his posture the moment he saw him move. The man's name was Dominic Moreau. Very few people in New York failed to recognize it. He owned investment firms, luxury properties, and businesses stretching across multiple states. Newspapers wrote about him. Television hosts speculated about him. Yet despite the attention, he remained intensely private. Tonight he had come to the restaurant for a business dinner. Instead, he had spent the last 20 minutes watching something else entirely. Watching a woman be humiliated and refusing to give her tormentors the satisfaction they wanted. Dominic stopped several feet from Amara. The room seemed to hold its breath. Brielle immediately noticed the change in atmosphere. Her smile faded slightly as she watched the stranger approach her sister. Phones shifted direction. Cameras followed him now instead of Amara. Dominic studied her for a moment, not in the uncomfortable way she had experienced from strangers before. His gaze was calm, observant, respectful, as though he were trying to understand something. Amara felt suddenly self-conscious. "Can I help you?" she asked quietly. Dominic's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I believe that depends," he replied. His voice was smooth and measured. "Are you leaving because you want to leave, or because someone else decided this evening for you?" The question caught her off guard. Around them, silence continued spreading through the dining room. Brielle was no longer smiling. Amara glanced toward her sister's table. Every eye remained fixed on them. She looked back at Dominic. "I think that is obvious." He nodded once. "Perhaps." Then he briefly glanced toward the large display screen, still showing frozen images from the slideshow. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. Not anger. Disapproval. "That is unfortunate," he said. Amara almost laughed at the understatement. "You could call it that." For the first time, a faint smile touched the corner of Dominic's mouth. Then he surprised her. "Miss Bennett, I have a question." She blinked. "What question?" He extended a hand toward an empty table overlooking the city skyline through towering glass windows. "A table prepared for two. Would you allow me to buy you dinner?" The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. The entire restaurant seemed to freeze. Phones stopped moving. Conversations vanished. Across the room, Brielle stared in disbelief. And for the first time all evening, nobody was looking at Amara as though she were the joke. For a few seconds, Amara wondered if she had misheard him. The restaurant remained so quiet that even the distant notes of the piano seemed louder than before. Dominic. Moreau stood patiently, his hand still extended toward the table near the windows. There was no trace of pity in his expression, no attempt to rescue her, no performance for the crowd. He simply looked at her as though the decision belonged entirely to her. That alone felt unfamiliar. All evening, people had been deciding things for her. Deciding what role she would play, deciding when she would be laughed at, deciding how she should react. Now, for the first time that night, someone was offering a choice. Amara glanced toward Brielle. Her sister appeared frozen. The confidence that had fueled the evening was beginning to crack. Several guests exchanged nervous looks. Others continued recording, although their excitement had shifted into uncertainty. Nobody seemed sure what would happen next. Amara looked back at Dominic. "You do not even know me," she said softly. A faint smile appeared. "That is true. Then why?" Dominic considered the question before answering. "Because I spent 20 minutes watching people tell you who you are." His gaze remained steady. "I would rather hear it from you." The words settled over the room like a blanket of silence. Amara felt something unexpected stir inside her chest. Not attraction. Not yet. Relief. Relief that someone had noticed what mattered. Not the jokes. Not the spectacle. Her. Slowly, she nodded. "All right." Dominic stepped aside and gestured toward the window table. The reaction was immediate. Whispers spread throughout the dining room. A few guests at Brielle's table lowered their phones entirely. Others looked embarrassed to still be holding them. Amara walked beside Dominic across the marble floor. Every step felt unreal. The city skyline stretched beyond the towering glass windows, thousands of lights glittering against the night sky. The table waiting for them overlooked the river and the glowing towers beyond. It was one of the most desirable seats in the restaurant. Dominic pulled out her chair. Amara sat down carefully. A server appeared almost instantly. The level of attention made it obvious that Dominic was not an ordinary customer. Yet he never acknowledged it. He thanked the server politely and requested 2 menus. Then he turned his attention back to Amara. "Now," he said, "let us start over." She almost laughed. "Start over?" "You walked into a room expecting one evening, and received another. His eyes softened slightly. That seems unfair. The tension in Amara's shoulders eased for the first time all night. Outside the windows, the lights of Manhattan shimmered against the dark water below. Inside, the restaurant slowly returned to normal. Conversations resumed. Glasses clinked. The piano continued playing. Yet one table remained the center of attention. Brielle watched from across the room. For years, she had controlled every story involving her sister. Tonight, for the first time, the story was moving beyond her reach. And as Dominic listened while Amara began speaking about her work, her family, and the life she had quietly built for herself, he discovered something the crowd had completely missed. The woman they had spent the evening mocking possessed a calm strength that could not be manufactured, and the more she spoke, the more difficult it became for him to look away. The people who are hardest to impress are often the ones who have already seen everything. The dinner that followed felt nothing like the evening Amara had expected when she first arrived. There were no jokes, no hidden cameras, no attempts to embarrass her. For the first time that night, someone asked questions and actually listened to the answers. Dominic listened more than he spoke. That alone surprised her. Most powerful people she had encountered enjoyed talking about themselves. Dominic seemed far more interested in understanding the person sitting across from him. The server arrived with menus, but much of the conversation continued long before either of them ordered. Amara told him about the community center where she worked. She described helping teenagers prepare college applications, organize volunteer projects, and navigate difficult situations at home. Her face brightened whenever she spoke about the young people she worked with. Dominic noticed immediately. The sadness from earlier had not disappeared, but purpose seemed to shine through it. You enjoy helping people, he observed. Amara smiled softly. Somebody helped me when I was younger. It felt wrong not to pass that forward. Dominic nodded. Most people say that. Very few actually do it. She laughed quietly. That sounds cynical. Experience usually does. For the first time all evening, she saw genuine amusement in his eyes. Meanwhile, across the restaurant, Brielle's table had become unusually quiet. The slideshow had long since ended. The livestream numbers were falling. Guests who had arrived expecting entertainment now spent more time watching the window table than speaking to one another. The spotlight had moved. Brielle hated that more than she cared to admit. Back at the table overlooking the skyline, dinner finally arrived. The city lights reflected against the glass windows behind them like scattered stars. Boats drifted along the river below. The restaurant's golden lighting cast a warm glow across polished silverware and crystal glasses. The atmosphere felt peaceful, almost unreal compared to the chaos from earlier. Dominic discovered that Amara possessed a quick wit hidden beneath her calm exterior. She noticed details other people missed. She could tell stories that were both funny and thoughtful. She spoke with kindness, but never with self-pity. Most surprising of all, she never once complained about Brielle, not even after everything that had happened. You are being very generous, Dominic finally said. About what? Your sister. Amara lowered her gaze briefly. She is still my sister. After tonight? She took a moment before answering. Being disappointed in someone does not erase years of loving them. Dominic sat back slightly. The response lingered in his mind. In his world, relationships often became transactions. Loyalty was conditional. Trust was fragile. Yet the woman sitting across from him continued choosing grace when bitterness would have been easier. He found that remarkable. Time passed faster than either expected. The tension from earlier continued fading until Amara caught herself smiling without effort. It had been a long time since she felt completely seen. Not compared to someone else. Not evaluated. Not judged. Simply seen. Across the room, several people who had originally laughed at her now looked uncomfortable. They had witnessed something they did not expect. The woman they had dismissed possessed a dignity that attention could not create and humiliation could not destroy. And as Dominic watched her laugh at one of his rare jokes, he realized something else. The most interesting person in the restaurant had never been the one standing in the spotlight. It had been the one quietly enduring it. The truth has a strange way of surfacing when people become too comfortable with deception. The evening should have ended there. A quiet dinner. A surprising conversation. Two strangers sharing a table overlooking the lights of Manhattan. Yet while Amara and Dominic spoke, events were unfolding beyond the restaurant walls. Brielle remained seated at her table, staring at her phone. The live stream that had begun with excitement was turning against her. New comments were appearing faster than she could read them. At first she dismissed them. Then she noticed a pattern. People were no longer laughing at Amara. They were criticizing her. Some viewers questioned why a sister would publicly embarrass another sister. Others pointed out how calm and dignified Amara had remained throughout the entire ordeal. The more Brielle read, the more frustrated she became. This was not how the night was supposed to end. She had planned every detail carefully. The photos, the jokes, the audience, the recordings. Everything had been designed to increase engagement and attract attention. Instead, attention had shifted somewhere else entirely. Across the room, Dominic happened to glance toward her table. He noticed the tension immediately. Years of negotiating with powerful people had taught him how to read expressions. Brielle looked less like someone enjoying success and more like someone watching a plan collapse. Dominic returned his attention to Amara, but something lingered in his mind. The evening felt too organized to be spontaneous, too calculated, too deliberate. "May I ask you something?" he said. Amara nodded. "Of course. Has your sister always enjoyed public attention?" Amara smiled sadly. "More than most people. And tonight?" She hesitated. Tonight felt different. Dominic leaned back slightly. "How so?" Amara looked toward the table. Usually she wants admiration. Tonight she wanted humiliation. The distinction caught his attention. A thoughtful silence followed. Meanwhile, one of Dominic's associates, who had been present earlier for the business meeting, quietly approached the restaurant manager near the entrance. A brief conversation took place. Nothing dramatic. Nothing visible to most guests. Yet within minutes, information began circulating among people who knew Brielle's online reputation. Several attendees at her table were influencers themselves. Some had collaborated with her before. Some knew details others did not. Whispers spread. Questions emerged. One guest quietly revealed that Brielle had recently built several campaigns around manufactured controversies. Another mentioned sponsorship negotiations tied directly to online engagement numbers. A third remembered seeing Amara's name connected to content that Amara herself had never appeared in. Piece by piece, an uncomfortable picture began forming. Brielle had not simply arranged a cruel joke. She had been turning private family moments into profitable content for months. Back at the window table, Amara remained unaware of most of it. She was focused on the conversation, focused on the rare comfort of being treated with genuine respect. Yet around the restaurant, attitudes continued changing. People who had laughed earlier now looked embarrassed. Some quietly deleted videos they had recorded. Others avoided eye contact entirely. And for the first time that evening, Brielle began experiencing something unfamiliar. The spotlight she had chased so desperately was no longer warming her. It was exposing her. 3 months later, the night at the restaurant felt like a distant memory, yet its consequences continued unfolding in ways nobody could have predicted. Brielle's carefully crafted online image had suffered a steady decline. The people who once celebrated every controversy she created had grown tired of manufactured drama. Sponsors quietly moved on. Followers questioned old content. Opportunities that once seemed guaranteed gradually disappeared. No public confrontation had destroyed her reputation. The truth had simply remained visible long enough for people to reach their own conclusions. Amara never celebrated any of it. She continued working at the community center. She continued helping students prepare for their futures. She continued living the same life she had built through patience, consistency, and kindness. The difference was that she no longer spent her energy trying to earn validation from people determined not to give it. Sometimes the greatest freedom comes from accepting that not everyone will understand your worth. During those months, Dominic remained part of her life. What began as occasional conversations became regular dinners, phone calls, and shared afternoons exploring parts of the city that neither had noticed before. He admired her perspective. She appreciated his honesty. Neither rushed to define what was growing between them. Some connections become stronger precisely because they are given room to breathe. Then one autumn evening, Dominic invited her to attend a charity gala benefiting youth education programs across New York. The ballroom occupied the top floor of a historic Manhattan building. Crystal chandeliers illuminated polished marble floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a skyline glowing beneath the evening sky. Business leaders, community organizers, philanthropists, and public figures filled the room. Amara almost declined. Large events had never been her favorite places. But Dominic insisted that she deserved to be there. When they arrived together, conversations briefly paused. Not because of Dominic. People were accustomed to seeing him. They paused because of the woman beside him. Many recognized her story. Many remembered the viral clips from months earlier. Yet the woman walking beside Dominic looked nothing like the person they had expected. She carried herself with quiet confidence. No spotlight. No performance. No resentment. Just dignity. Later that evening, the Charity Foundation announced a special recognition award for outstanding service to young people in underserved communities. To Amara's complete shock, her name was called. The nomination had come from dozens of former students whose lives she had influenced over the years. As she stepped onto the stage, the room rose to its feet. The applause continued far longer than she expected. Standing near the front, Dominic watched with unmistakable pride. Not because she belonged to him, not because he had rescued her, but because she had earned every second of that moment herself. When Amara finished speaking and stepped down from the stage, Dominic met her near the ballroom floor. For a brief moment, surrounded by hundreds of guests, neither said anything. They simply smiled. The room felt warm. The city lights sparkled beyond the glass. And somewhere in the distance, a string quartet continued playing softly. The woman who had once been invited to become a joke had become something far more powerful. She had become impossible to overlook. The room went silent in all the ways that mattered. And that day, everyone remembered what dignity looks like. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share so more people can discover stories that remind us why respect, kindness, and character will always matter.